Hey Lukeworms, the first problem we're going to do is given an array of whole numbers, we're going to calculate the sum. So here in Alice, I already have, oops, sorry, I didn't want all of that. I've got a array of numbers. Okay, here's an array of numbers, and I've got the sum variable, which is equal to 0 because I'm going to actually say the sum in the end, and then the tiger will say what the sum is. So when you hit run, he'll say the sum is 0. Obviously not correct. Now the first step you want to do is get it working with the first two values. So you can say the sum is equal to, there's this new option, the array. What location do I want to get the first two values, the 3 and the 1? 0 plus pi at 1. So pi at 0 plus pi at 1, it should say what? It should say 4. Yay! Okay, so here we go. We've got the first thing working. Okay, now we are going to need to loop it. So there's a couple options. Count for each in or for each do together. Whenever you're doing calculations, I recommend you stay away from the do together and just do things in order. It should work do together, but for each in order probably is going to be the easiest. Okay, so just like we did before, okay, you have to say what data type it is. Now you say an item name. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. So I need to give a variable name, I'll call it n, which represents round 1, n is 3. Round 2, it's a 1, and then 2, and then n is a 1, and then n is a 4, and so on. Okay? So what I wanted this to do is I want the sum to equal what it was plus the next item in the array. Okay? So I want the sum to equal, would I want to say pi 0 plus pi 1? No, I want it to equal what the sum was plus the next item in the list. Okay? And the reason I drag this in here is to show you a common mistake. I want it to equal the sum, but notice I can't choose the sum here. That's because when you say whole number sum, that is the first time that you are creating it, so it's not yet available. So you really need to create the sum outside of your loop. If you create it inside of your loop, you're creating a new variable every round, and that's going to be a problem. So I can set my sum equal to, now I have the ability to say sum, plus pi at spot n. And let's talk about why it's n, okay? Oh, I'm sorry. It's just n, not pi at spot n, okay? Round 1, n is 3. So the sum starts at 0. So after round 1, the sum is 0 plus 3. So if we had the tiger say it, it should say 3 for the first round. Boom. Now, on the second round, because it's every item in pi, it should be the sum is 3 plus 1. Then it'll say 4. Then it'll say 6, 7, 11, and 12. So 3, 4, and so on. once you have that working and see how I'm kind of testing it as I go, I then can just do it at the end. So it should say 12. Okay? Example 2, we're modifying the problem from above. But this time, we want to calculate all the numbers except for the last one. So, in this previous one, this for each item in an array, it always goes from the first number all the way to the end. Are we going to be able to use this for the example? No. Now, there is a creative way of just doing this, but just subtracting the last value, which, I'd probably recommend. But for learning purposes, we're going to learn how to use another way of doing the same problem. Okay? So I'm going to keep the same setup, but I'm going to have a regular count loop. Okay? Now in this count loop, notice there's something called pi length. Pi is the name of our array. So right now, the length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 items in the array, so this will loop 6 times. Now, if we want it to count every number except for the last location, how many times do we want it to repeat? 5 times, not 6. So you can take the length and subtract 1. Now, why wouldn't I just want to just say, you know what? I want it to just be count up to 5 times. Why might that not be the best option for what we're trying to do? So, I heard from a couple people, specifically Nathan, that if you were to change the size of the array and we were to have one more item in there, now this count up to 5 is incorrect. So, by keeping it the length and doing math minus 1, now, no matter what you change your array to, it'll always count up to the correct amount. Okay? So, now we've got to figure out how to get our sum to change. We want our sum, still just like our last one, to equal sum plus the next item in our array. In the previous example, we were able to use the variable called n, but not on this one, because when you drag in this for each in together, or for each in, it automatically does some code for you. We're going to do that code ourselves. So I'm going to create a variable called n, which is a whole number set to 0. Okay? N, I'm going to add a comment. N is a counter variable. Okay? So we'll add that to our note shortly. Okay? So I want it to equal pi at spot n, with n is currently spot 0. So round 1, sum is 0, plus pi at spot n is 0, pi at spot 0 is 3. So after round 1, the sum is 3. Now, right now, if I were to run, it'll say what? So as Elias says, it will be 6. Now, we don't want it to obviously be 6. We want it to equal the next item in our array. So you can change n. What do you want to change n to? You want to change it to 1. Now, if we loop this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, do we always want to change n to 1? No, we want to change it to n plus 1. It's always going to be 1 more than it was. So now it should say 3 4, 6, 7, 11, 12. Oh! Okay. It didn't say the last one, but let's test here if it'll say 17. Oh, it says 12. Oh, right. It says 12 because we added that 5 in there. That's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. It sums up every item except for the last one. Okay? So variable n is a counter variable. Okay? All right, we're going to do our last example for these notes. Okay? In the last example, one second. All right, given an array of strings, we're going to swap the order of hello becomes hola or ole. Okay? So, here I have the setup. I've got a word stores hello. Well, H is at index 0 and so on. So, the first thing you want to do is make it work with the first two values. So I want to change word at spot 0 to, what do I want to change word at spot 0 to? If this is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, I want it to be word at spot 4. And then I want to change spot 4 to what? 0. Let's have the tiger say what's at word 0 and what's at spot 4. Okay? So in my first method, we're going to disable the say, and we're going to call this function called swap, or method called swap. So he's going to say 0 or 0. So spot 0 should say O. That worked. But 4 did not work. So this is good. Before we start worrying about loops, we didn't get the first part to work correctly. So that's the first thing you have to do. Now, as soon as you change spot 0 to what's at 4, whatever was there gets erased. So you're going to need a variable, which I like to call temp. Means it's temporary. Okay? And I'm going to have it store what's at spot 0. So temp is going to store this H, because when you do word at spot 0 equals word at spot 4, whatever is at 0 gets erased. So now temp at spot 4, what is that going to equal now? So you want to set it to what's at temp, because temp stores the H, 0 now stores the O, and 4 now is the H. So it should say O, OH. Okay? Now, all we would need to do here is loop it, but that's long enough for notes, so we're going to call it good for now.